Welcome to the Moviegoers Society podcast brought to you by Nerdtropolis. I'm your host, Sean Tajipour, the mayor of Nerdtropolis, and join me once again for another awesome week as my co-host, Drew Munhausen, the professional media and movie mastermind. What's going on, Drew?
Not too much. Like we were just talking before we started recording. Like the weather here is actually really nice. I spent a lot of the weekend outside. We're both kind of battling some allergy symptoms here. So if you hear it in our voices, that's why. But otherwise, really, really good and fulfilling weekend. So I can't complain too much.
Are you house shopping? What's going on behind you?
Oh, yes. This is the house that everybody wants to buy. For those that can't see it, it is the iconic shot of the house from the original Exorcist movie, which I thought was appropriate since we'll be talking later about the Exorcist Believer, which is one of the kind of legacy sequels to the original Exorcist movie.
Yeah, very fitting. So yeah, in this podcast, we dive into the world of cinema, exploring everything from beloved classics, the latest blockbusters. And yeah, we're on episode number 13, which is so fitting for this week because this Friday is Friday the 13th. And on top of that, just Drew mentioned, we're tackling Exorcist Believer. So like, just weird how this just fell in our laps.
It's true. Everything kind of worked out. And, I'm glad that we have we'll dive into the quality of it, but we have a truly spooky movie to talk about for that 13th episode, because the actual big release that comes out on Friday the 13th is the Taylor Swift concert film. So I'm glad that we're able to talk about this, to kind of line up with our 13th episode and Friday the 13th.
That is right, Drew. Did you buy your tickets for this? Is it an Eras concert in cinemas? I don't know. What is it? What is going on with Taylor Swift?
Swifties, don't come for me. But no, I did not pre-order tickets. Apparently I'm one of the few who did not, because apparently the pre-orders are pretty strong on Taylor Swift the Eras tour, the concert film. So yeah, it's projected to do pretty well. So what do I know?
I guess we gotta talk about it next week and see how it does. But we're gonna talk about the Exorcist Believer. We're also going to talk about Totally Killer, which fits Friday 13th vibes. And we're going to touch on the conclusion of the Ahsoka series. But before we get into all that, we wanted to make sure you can connect with us online. You can find me, myself, Nerdtropolis, and myself on every social media platform you can think of. If a new one comes out tomorrow, it's going to be the same handles, I'm sure. You can follow me at Sean Taj, and then you can follow at Nerdtropolis on every platform you can think of. And also don't forget to visit nerdtropolis.com for your daily dose of movie news, reviews, interviews, and trailers. And Drew, where can they find you when you aren't contributing to Nerdtropolis?
At Drew Munhausen on all the different social media platforms, and weekly over at Fresh Out the Podcast, where we talk about all kinds of fun stuff other than movies, video games, TV, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and also don't forget to catch up on past episodes of the Moviegoers Society and tune into my podcast on Nerdtropolis Mayor Presents, where I talk to actors when the strike it's going to be over, but writers and directors and producers. I've talked to anyone from Hollywood, and you can find that on our YouTube channel, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And I have so many interviews, Drew. I feel like I'm going to start pushing 2 to 3 per week now. Can you imagine that? That's how much I've recorded, that I can push out at least 2 a week. It seems
that's great. That's good news.
Yeah, a double dose for everyone that wants to check out these awesome episodes. But a lot of good stuff coming your way, and definitely more episodes of the Moviegoer Society podcast. Right now, I think we can go into Totally Killer, which is a new film streaming on Prime Video. I'm not sure how many of y'all out there have heard of Totally Killer, but it's a very cool concept. It kind of plot revolves this killer, Sweet 16 killer, they call him. And he makes his killings on Halloween night. And then it sets a stage for a really awesome actress that we don't really get to see that often. Last time we saw her, I believe, was on the Sabrina show on Netflix, Karen Shipka. And it kind of is, I don't want to give too much away, but to me, it pays homage to a lot of classic horror from the 80s and 90s and beyond. And then it adds a sci-fi twist to it of like Back to the Future. So think of Scream meets Back to the Future, and this is what you get, which is a lot of fun. What did you think about this movie, Drew?
Yeah, I think it's worth noting this was actually the closing night film for Fantastic Fest, but both you and I had to leave the festival before we could get to it. So I didn't actually get to see it at the festival. So I was kind of eagerly awaiting this one to come out on Prime Video, and luckily it wasn't that long of a wait. And yeah, I thought it was pretty fun. It falls in line with the Christopher Landon horror movies that I like a lot. He's the one who directed like Happy Death Day and the sequel, and he also did a movie called Freaky. And both of those kind of play with concepts that we've seen in all kinds of other movies, but puts like a horror slasher twist on it. Like Happy Death Day takes the Groundhog Day scenario and makes it into a slasher movie. Freaky takes like Freaky Friday or body swap comedy and makes that into a slasher movie. And then Totally Killer is, like you said, it's like Back to the Future, but with kind of a slasher twist. And the main girl like goes back in time and and befriends her mom in high school to try to like warn them of these murders that are going to happen. And so from a concept standpoint, I thought that was super fun. And the tone really worked. The director, Nanach Kakan, hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly, she created the series Fresh Off the Boat, which has Randall Park in it, and like he's in this movie. And she also directed Always Be My Maybe, which I liked a lot. I actually probably liked that one a little bit more than Totally Killer, but Totally Killer is super fun. And like if you have a Prime Video subscription, it's worth checking out for something kind of fun to watch this season, something fun and new. Kiernan Shipka, the lead, like you said, is great. I haven't seen her in much before. I know she was the lead in the Sabrina series on Netflix, and I never dabbled with that one, but I really enjoyed her in this. It's not a perfect movie, and definitely when you deal with time travel and the lore that surrounds it, there's like a lot of rules that can be established, and some movies play with it in different ways. And this one's very much like a don't think about it too much kind of movie. Like it's just a concept, like we're a slasher movie, there's time travel, you don't have to think about it too much, we're just having fun with it. And that really worked for me. It's a good, I don't want to say turn your brain off slasher movie, but like it's just fun. It's fun enough, and it doesn't require, super in-depth analysis.
Yeah, there's so much humor in this movie, which I love. It doesn't take itself seriously. The plot is not like super solid, but that's the thing. It's not trying to tell you how time travel really is supposed to work and logic works in this. It's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of holes in the plot, and I think they do it on purpose at times, and they poke fun at that. You notice they do poke fun at some of the plot holes that occur, and they're like, just don't think about it. It is what it is. Who knows why it happens?
One of the concepts in this that like it was kind of funny, but then I think they kind of wore it out a little bit too much, is like a common thing that happens when you watch movies from the 80s now is you're like, what aged well and what didn't age well. And it toys with that in the movie, that like a lot of times when she's back in the 80s, people say or do things that she's like, you can't say that. You can't do that. It's not acceptable in 2023, but maybe the rules were a little bit more lax in back in the 80s. And I thought that was kind of funny, but it almost like hit us over the head with it a little bit too hard as it went on. But so like they really do play with the modern TikTok culture and comparing it to the 80s, and some of that can be fun.
Yeah, this takes place in 1987, so definitely there's gonna be a culture shock when she goes back. Like you said, she befriends her mom from her high school years, who was a survivor of the killings. So that's going to be a part of the plot, which is really cool. And that's played by Modern Family, Julie Bowen, which was really awesome to see. I didn't know who was in this film, so I was super excited when I saw her. I was like, this is pretty fun. I don't see her much, and she did a really good job. And then the young version of her was really fun to see. I think that's played by Olivia Holt, and pretty good cast, pretty fun cast, pretty diverse, and a lot of cool stuff. And like I said, if you like Back to the Future like I do, it was a lot of fun to kind of see them kind of pay homage to it.
And this is just a really random thing, but it stuck out to me because the dad in the present is played by Lachlan Monroe. And whenever I think of it, I think one of the first things I ever saw him in was he's in the original Scary Movie. And he like plays one of the high schoolers in that. And that came out in 1999. And he plays the dad in this. So it's like always kind of funny when people who have done kind of like horror comedies from back in the day are now like the parents in horror comedies. It's always kind of funny to see. But Julie Bowen actually, she doesn't get like as much screen time as I probably would have liked, but she's really good with what she has here. I enjoyed her.
Yeah, and you mentioned Fresh Off the Boat. The director is the creator of that, and so it was kind of fun to see Randall Park in this. And
Yeah, he's always great when he pops up in anything. Somebody else who I wish could have had more screen time just because his sense of comedy really works well for me. But the young actors and actresses that are in this are doing a solid job for, like a genre concept slasher movie.
yeah, I think it's a perfect movie to kind of kick off October, which I did. I think the first day of October I watched it, and it's not very like hardcore when it comes to the genre. It plays it pretty safe and just the visuals too. So it's not something like you're gonna be scared of watching or anything like that. It's actually really fun and comical. So it's definitely a lighter film to kick off spooky season, which I really enjoyed because I'm really not a fan of the stuff that scares me because I don't want to be haunted for the rest of my life. But I really enjoyed it. It was tons of fun. And so I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, Drew. I rated it pretty good. I thought it was a lot of fun and something kind of fresh that we haven't seen in a while, kind of this kind of take on the slasher genre and make fun of it as well.
I'm probably sitting at like a good 3 out of 5 stars, but that's still a positive review. I enjoyed it. I think it's totally watchable. Yeah, I thought it was a good time and worth using your Prime Video account to check it out.
Yeah, it's actually a really good movie for Prime Video. If they can bring more films like that, I'll be really happy of paying the extra whatever they want to add for whatever changes Amazon has for Prime. Because I feel like some of the movies are adding that, I understand the ones that go in theaters and they put the Prime, but like kind of ones made for Prime have been hit or miss. And so I kind of want to see a higher quality of films make their way to Prime.
Prime Video is like sneakily putting out decent movies almost weekly now. I feel like compared to some of the other streamers with original movies, like obviously Netflix is doing that too, but not all of the other streamers are putting out original movies every week. And Prime is doing so. I mean, we just talked about A Million Miles Away a couple weeks ago, which was pretty solid. And this I actually probably liked a little bit more than that one. But like they're just putting like it's that good like mid-budget movie that doesn't really get released in theaters anymore. Like theaters right now, it seems like it's either the big blockbusters or it's like the awards fodder. And this is kind of all those like old school mid-budget movies that used to, come out to supplement all the big releases. It's like, this is where they're going. And again, this one caught me off guard when the credits came up at the beginning and it was like Amazon MGM Studios because, Amazon bought MGM. And so this must, had to have been an MGM project that then, was part of that purchase. So yeah, it's Amazon MGM Studios. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, so check it out. I'm sure, majority of people out there have a Prime account. So definitely watch it this month. It's a really good movie to watch during October. And I think we should just talk before we get into Exorcist Believer. I think we just talk about the last few episodes of Ahsoka as it comes to an end. I really don't want to spend too much time on Ahsoka because to be honest, Drew, it's just a little lackluster for me. There's a little lackluster of what they delivered. I did watch Clone Wars and Rebels, so like I'm very familiar with that stuff. So I did enjoy what they did, giving us like a follow-up to Rebels and a reunion and sorts. But man, it took too long to really get nowhere. I feel like it ended like it wasn't really a true ending to me. It's like we're gonna open up a can of worms and just leave it there, and then we'll figure out what the studio wants to do with what they presented at the end. And kind of, I don't know, I just didn't like how it ended. And I just don't like some of the fight scenes that we got. I thought they were just really amateurish, and I don't want to be harsh on it because I love Star Wars and I liked everything else. And I wasn't trying to nitpick Ahsoka because I did enjoy it as it started, but the journey wasn't that great to wait for it every week. If I could sit down in a day and watch it all, I probably would have said, this is a pretty good watch. But to wait every week and anticipate something that fails to deliver something, I just couldn't get on board.
I feel like I could write a college dissertation on my feelings on this show and just what they're choosing to do and how they're choosing to go about it. A few weeks ago when we had JC on the show, we were talking about it, and I feel like we were pretty harsh on it. He especially had some really interesting thoughts on it, and he was, he even said, hopefully the haters don't find him or, whatever, but had some hot takes. But I mean, at the same time, like a lot of his takes I thought were pretty justified, and we had a lot of what I feel to be legitimate criticisms with Ahsoka. And as we continued watching it beyond that, there were a couple episodes there in the middle I want to say like the 5th and 6th episodes in particular that I thought were really great. And I was like, okay, this show is becoming something that I really like and enjoy. Like this is seeming really good. And then the last 2 episodes, I feel like kind of squandered that goodwill they had earned from me. And I also agree that I thought it was a lackluster finale. Can I go into spoilers? Can I talk some spoilers here? Or you wanted me to avoid it?
No, I guess go for it. I mean, let's do it. I'll say this real quick though. For a show called Ahsoka, and for people that didn't watch Clone Wars or Rebels, they introduced way too many brand new characters that got a lot of screen time, and it's really hard for these people to understand like their importance. I felt like we had more screen time for everyone else than Ahsoka. Ahsoka wasn't really in the show as much as she could be. A lot of scenes that were her just missing, and that's not Ahsoka series. That's a new season of Rebels.
This show is effectively a new season of Rebels. Like, let's be totally clear. And I'm with you. Like, I didn't watch Rebels, like, and I've been pretty vocal about that. And I haven't watched all of Clone Wars, but I wanted to watch this because I like Star Wars and I like live action Star Wars. And this is a new live action Star Wars series on the streaming service that I pay for. And I should be able to jump into that without having to have watched all the animated series. In my opinion, I feel like this would have been a good opportunity to make this approachable to both the fans that have watched those animated shows and the fans that haven't. And at the end of this, I feel like they really isolated themselves with the product that came out. And like, this really is just a continuation of Rebels. And I know enough about Rebels and have enough friends that have watched Rebels to kind of know what the general consensus is of that show and things that happened and like what people think of Thrawn and what people think of some of these characters. But for me, as somebody who's watching Ahsoka as a standalone show, I know there are a lot of fans that love Thrawn and he's a big bad guy. If you're just watching Ahsoka, there's nothing in this show that for me to be like, oh, wow, Thrawn's so cool. What a cool bad guy. Like, there was nothing there. I find Sabine to be not very likable in the show that's presented here. And I feel like the show is really banking on you liking Sabine a lot. And yeah, and Ahsoka doesn't even really feel like the star of her own show. There's other characters. I know a little bit about Ezra and he's introduced in latter episodes. And I actually really like the actor that played him. Like, I thought that was a good portrayal of Ezra and there's some likability there. There's like some silly rock crab creatures that are introduced. Like, they're almost like rock crab turtles. I really liked those. Like, there are things that I liked. But for the most part, it's like, I know how Rebels ended. And my take on watching Ahsoka is they pretty much undid the sacrifice and what made the ending of Rebels special to like pretty much just walk it back to very little fanfare. And they've left it on a cliffhanger. And I thought Ahsoka was going to be kind of a standalone miniseries. And they're clearly, if they're not setting up for season 2, then they're setting up for whatever movie Dave Filoni is supposed to be making in the future. And I just feel like they're isolating people with where they're going. I mean, even The Mandalorian's really tying into a lot of these shows, animated shows that have existed before. And I just think that they're, I don't know, like, I want there to be things for the hardcore fans, but things also not for the hardcore fans. And this show is just, it's not going to be for everybody. And I think that's a risky decision to make for an IP as big as Star Wars, to not make it approachable to everyone. I know people, I talked to people who watched the first 2 episodes of Ahsoka and they're like, I don't know what's happening, I'm out. And they never caught up with the rest of it. So anyway, I know that that's a lot to go on about. There's also some fears that we had when talking with JC about the Force and how it would be used at the end of this and where we thought it might go. And I think it's safe to say it went in the direction we didn't want it to go. And there were some things that really didn't make sense for me. And it kind of messes with the Star Wars lore in a way that I don't like, because now it's like, anybody can use the Force. Like, that's it. That's anybody can. And I guess that's always kind of been a thing, but like, this made it seem like it's not even that difficult to use the Force if you really want to. So I don't know. It's just, I'm not even the biggest Star Wars nerd, but I guess I feel like I'm taking this one personally.
And the funny thing is, I mentioned earlier, is like, I don't want to spend much time on this. And then I feel like now you got me so like thinking about so much Star Wars stuff. I have so much more to say now.
It's tough. It's tough. It's just, and like,
tough.
I know that there are people
Yeah.
that love this show, and that's
Yeah.
great, but I'm not one of them.
Well, that's the thing I was going to say, like, because I love Star Wars and I grew up watching Star Wars, and this is 8 episodes, and this could have been like a 3-part series, or this could have been a movie of its own if it was going to deliver such a slow pace and not really deliver much of an ending. And yeah, who's the bad guy in this like series? Like what purpose?
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right, because they set up Balin as like a pretty interesting villain with kind of an intriguing backstory that you want to learn more about. Obviously, Ray Stevenson, rest in peace. Like, we're probably not going to get much Balin in the future unless they recast the character. But like, once Thrawn enters the scene, Balin totally gets discarded. It's like you get nothing. There's no payoff there.
And
it's
like
really
Thrawn
disappointing.
is just really trying to get back, but he's not really like urgency of doing anything. He doesn't have a plan, or not sharing with us what his plan is. I thought Moff Gideon was excellent for the Mandalorian series, and I wish we got a Moff Gideon type character, or someone even more extreme than him. But Thrawn is just too chill, which is just part of his demeanor, and then that's what makes him, like, I guess, the great leader for that side. But he got his stuff together, I guess, But there's no real threat. It's a very small level baddies in the show. I feel like that nothing is really that extreme, because obviously it's on a whole different side of the galaxy, and until they get back to where they need to be and do that hyperspace jump, like nothing really matters, and we don't know what's going to happen now. And this series takes place after the original trilogy, and then we have the newer trilogies, and I'm kind of tired of the space in between, and even we're going to get new movies that happen after the new trilogy that we just had. I really want to go as far back as we can. That really feels like it's disconnected from all the movies we've gotten, and revisit or visit a place that we haven't been, a time period at least. Revisit similar places, but I want to go back so far and kind of learn more about Star Wars that way on the big screen, instead of all this like in between stuff.
I struggle with it too. It's like this one takes place after the original trilogy, like you said, but whereas like Andor takes place, as a prequel to A New Hope, and the Obi-Wan series also takes place between the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. But then you have the Mandalorian series and now Ahsoka that takes place after. And I do sometimes find myself having to remind myself, like, is this after the sequel trilogy? Is this before the original trilogy? Is it after the original? Is it between? Like, I find, and then they'll make comments and they'll be like, General Leia this, and I'm like, okay, Leia's alive here. Where I see where we're at. Yeah, it's like you almost have to continuously remind yourself of where you're at in some of these shows. Whereas if you just had something that was not aligned with any of that, it just be its own thing, and it doesn't matter where it takes place in the Skywalker timeline. Just give me like a new thing that's different, separate.
And I don't know where
I thought the Mandalorian was that.
The Mandalorian was that, and then now we're gonna get the Skeleton Crew, and I'm not sure where that's gonna take place. And like I said, I don't want to start thinking about these shows connecting into these movies that we've gotten. It's kind of like Marvel, like all these series. All the MCU series connect to a future movie, or has a connection to a past MCU movie. I'm like, I don't want to start connecting things anymore. I really want good standalone films, or just give me a solid trilogy and tell a story across 3 films and be done with it.
Episode 7, 8, and 9 obviously each made a lot of money, regardless of the reviews and how things were. Like, they did really well. Solo, A Star Wars Story, is a movie that cost a lot, and it had a lot of production issues with directors and so on and so forth, but it cost a lot and it did not make nearly as much money as what they wanted. Like, it's definitely considered to be a disappointment from that standpoint. And that's a prequel movie about one of the most well-known characters in on-screen fiction. Like, Han Solo is a super famous character. They gave us a prequel about Han Solo and it didn't do well. Now you're going to tell me that you're going to potentially have a movie that, like, 3 or 4 seasons of The Mandalorian and a season or 2 of Ahsoka lead into the show, and it requires you to have all of this, knowledge of what came before it comes out. I feel like whatever movie Dave Filoni makes, if it is something that ties into these series, I just can't imagine it doing very well. Even if the hardcore fans show up for it, I don't think it's going to have the mass appeal. And I just feel like they're isolating themselves. I keep using that word isolating, but that's how I feel. I feel like they're isolating themselves with these series instead of making content that could be have more mass appeal.
Yeah, these pocket stories between all these films that we got are just, we don't need them. I don't think they're necessary. They worked as, as the animated series when we got Clone Wars and stuff like that to fill in some of the gaps. But as live action, I don't think they do any good. They're a waste of time, I feel like, because they're not delivering any big ideas or big fun. It's such on a small scale. We're also getting a Lando series, which sure might be cool, but it's no more series. It's gonna be a Lando movie.
I would prefer that anyway. So
yeah.
That's not the worst news for me personally.
Yeah, I don't want to wait every week to watch something. I just kind of want to sit down and binge unless they release everything at once. And then also there's a lot of cool characters that appear in the books and comics that never made their live action debut and stuff like that. And it'd be really cool to see some of the stuff, or even like Darth Maul could have returned at some point, especially after we saw in Solo. I mean, man, it would have been cool to see him return in his capacity other than in the animated form, but we're never going to get that, it seems like, either. But I don't know, Star Wars and Marvel, I'm just getting a little scared of what they're doing over there at Disney.
Yeah, agreed.
But I guess we can move on. It was not as short as I thought because we're so passionate about Star Wars too, So I was like, oh, let's try to make it short, but it didn't happen. But that's okay.
I knew I had some things I needed to get off my chest.
Same
so
here.
I'll carry the blame here.
No, I did too, and I tried to keep it in, and then I was like, oh no, I'm going to come out with it as well. So we'll see what happens. But I think also Disney Plus needs to crank out some more materials. I'm really not a fan of paying how much I am for this bundle and not watching much, especially on Hulu. Not much on Hulu and not much on Disney Plus other than classics. Not worth the price to me right now. And I think they're doing another price hike.
Yeah, it's a tough time when you're right now for those of us juggling multiple streaming services.
Every single streamer out there, we have them. But yeah, so we're going to talk about The Exorcist Believer. Drew, I don't remember the last time. First of all, I'm not familiar with the book. And I don't remember the last time I watched the original film until I did watch it the night before I caught Believer. I don't think I watched, is there a second and third? I don't think that. But I've seen a bunch of Exorcist type movies. So it's not like I'm new to the type of genre it's trying to deliver, type of film it's trying to deliver. And I will say this. When I watched the original Exorcist, the one that you have behind you, a lot of cool moments and great moments, but maybe it was awesome for its time, but I had a problem watching it. I didn't think it was taking us anywhere. Other than really what it did for its time when it came out. I'm not a fan of the original Exorcist. I didn't find it that scary, even though I scare easily. A lot of cool scenes though, and saw like gruesome stuff and like really radical stuff in there for sure. But nothing where I'm like, this is one of the best horror movies of all time. It makes everyone's like top 5 list, and I don't know how.
Shawn, we're gonna have to box here. Oh no, I am not liking this take from you.
It's a tough one, I know.
I think I watched the original one. I think I was in high school, and maybe like a freshman in high school at a party with friends, and we watched it. And I remember being like kind of scared of it at the time, just because when you're that young and something is hyped to you as being super scary. I think I did find myself to be scared of it. I rewatched this a couple of years ago during the pandemic, the original that is, and I still think it holds up. There are definitely some parts that drag, and it tries to give a lot of like lore and world building. That stuff I'm sure hasn't aged well. I think that all of the actual possession stuff still works pretty well. Obviously, this isn't the 70s when it came out, when like it was a true cultural phenomenon, and you can see why. We've had so many horror movies that have pushed the boundary since this that we just it's a different viewing in 2023 for sure. But I still think the original is amazing. I think it's fantastic.
And I know it's so great for its time and did so well with, award season and stuff like that. It got, a lot of praise for it. So I definitely see why. But for me, watching it in 2023, I was like, I understand the excitement back then, but I can't get on the excitement now for it. And, now they have this follow up, which has no connection to 2 and 3. Even 3, I think the third one doesn't have no connection to really any of it. So it's a very strange franchise indeed. But they brought back the guy that directed Halloween Kills and Ends. So I was already kind of on the fence of what was going on because I thought those films were okay-ish. And this film is rated R. I don't think I felt like this film was rated R. The Exorcist Believer was rated R to me when I was watching it. I was like, where's these rated R scenes and parts that really was going to push it to the edge? Especially the first film was so iconic. I thought this was really going to push the boundaries of its rating.
I'm going to push back on you again here because I know it's not like super bloody or that they're using like that many curse words. I mean, I know it uses like the F word a lot, but I just think anything that has to do with possession and then you're going into like religious horror and like it's more of like in the theory and plotting and the themes that it deals with, dealing with very R-rated material as opposed to like giving you R-rated visuals, if that makes sense. That's my take on it.
Well, I watched The Boogeyman, which is PG-13, and that scared me a lot compared to this. And I felt like they had more jump scares. They did some really weird jump scares in The Exorcist Believer. And I was like, these are really cheap jump scares. There's a snake scene, and I knew something was coming, and I was just like, what is this? And some of it's just like loud noise. It's just, what are they trying to do? The scary part is really the exorcism part. And those scenes were good. Okay, they weren't great or anything, but everything else trying to build it up didn't work, I felt like. And I had a lot of opportunities to really add more. I feel like a lot of the plot was missing with the girls that get possessed. I feel like there was a little more questions that we needed answered, or maybe some interesting scenes we could have seen, but I don't know. I just felt like it wasn't the follow-up, the legacy sequel, I guess you can call it, that I was expecting.
Yeah. Talking about David Gordon Green, first off, the director, he directed the most recent Halloween trilogy, as you said. The first Halloween movie from 2018, I really liked that movie a lot. Actually, I was a big fan of that one. And then I thought that Kills was pretty disappointing, and Ends gets a bad rap. I actually had a lot of things I liked about Ends. I'm like one of the few Halloween Ends defenders. But I also understand the complaints with it. But I found it to be interesting, and I enjoyed some of the things that it tried to do.
Were you interesting because of the dual killer? Was that the interesting parts to you? That could have made for like a fourth movie. They could have gone that route. I felt like somehow. I felt like it was a waste to do that for Halloween Ends, and that could have been used as a fourth film. Because it's not a bad concept. It's a brilliant concept. I actually liked it, but I don't think it fit for finishing off a trilogy.
I just feel like with the trilogy and what they were doing and how much Michael Myers himself went through in those 3 movies, I'm like, I don't know how you could even justify, even with the crazy Halloween lore, Michael Myers coming back for another round. But that being said, like, I thought David Gordon Green did some really interesting things to try to resurrect that franchise. So when he moved on to doing The Exorcist with Universal and Blumhouse and everything, I was kind of excited for it, or not excited, but I should say like optimistic for it. That being said, this, it's a legacy sequel similar to what Halloween was with Jamie Lee Curtis, and they bring back Ellen Burstyn for this one. And whereas the legacy sequel stuff in that Halloween franchise, especially that first movie, really worked for me, it is so unnecessary in The Exorcist Believer, in my opinion. All of the actual legacy items they included with Ellen Burstyn, it just was so unnecessary. None of it really fits into the plot. It's totally filler. It drags the movie way down. I mean, this movie is not, it's what, an hour and 51 minutes. It felt like it was over 2 hours. Like I just felt like it was long and it dragged a bit. And I think it's because of some of the legacy aspects they were trying to bring into it. The strongest stuff in it is the possession stuff, and there's some decent visuals and things there, but it just takes a while to get there. And yeah, I agree. None of the actual jump scares had to do with the possessions at all. It was a lot of in the first half and kind of building the story. And like you said, there's some cheap ones like a snake jump that it made me jump, but I'm like, that's silly. Yeah, it's like it almost just would have been better as just a standalone, movie under the Exorcist umbrella, but not trying to tie in these old things. I just felt like it was so unnecessary. That being said, there were some I didn't get to go to an early screening of this. I saw it on Thursday night. It's opening weekend, and there's not very many people in the theater I was in, and I had read some pretty harsh reviews of this. Like this one was getting torn apart critically pretty badly. So I had pretty low expectations. That being said, I went into it like I thought it was totally serviceable. Like I thought it was a fine horror movie. It's well made, I guess, from that standpoint. The makeup effects and the possession stuff is pretty well done. There's just a lot with the story that kind of drags. Leslie Odom Jr. though is really good and it is the lead. So
he's good in it, but they don't use him really to the extent they could. I felt like his role was a little weak for the story itself, but
they're just really trying to do a lot here. And yeah,
you add two girls possessed and then you add another family into it and you add so many more characters. It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. Like I don't think the story was good enough for it. It could have been so much more compelling, especially having like two girls possessed, but even how they got possessed. I mean, they do tell you a little bit about it, but it'd been nice to kind of see that happen. And a lot of the story is missing, I feel like.
You're totally right. I mean, it's a really good point. Yeah. From you see what the girls are going to do and then cut to when they are back on screen, they're possessed. And yeah, it does almost feel like there was a lot left on the cutting room floor.
I mean, you have that whole introduction of him meeting his wife or being with his wife who's pregnant. And that takes up like a good majority of the movie. That's like the beginning scene. And maybe that felt like a 15, 20 minute introduction right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I just have really mixed feelings about this one. Like on one hand, I want to be like, it's not that bad. And on the other hand, I'm like, there's a lot of things that you can really nitpick about it here and pull apart with the story. And you mentioned the two girls that are actually possessed here. And one of them I thought was like noticeably a stronger performance than the other one. Like I thought Leslie Odom Jr.'s, the girl that played his daughter in it was really good. But yeah,
there's just so much hype for this movie because they keep saying it's connected to the original one. And obviously the original got so much high praise and this is a legacy sequel. And then Blumhouse attaches its name to it. When you attach Blumhouse name, it's just more hype for some reason. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think Blumhouse has a quality problem because they push so much quantity out there and they want to put their hands on everything that the quality check just goes nowhere with them sometimes of really bringing top tier quality. They bring really good quality films, but they don't have anything that's to that top tier. I feel like when they deliver.
The thing with that though is that Blumhouse is typically dealing with movies that are pretty low budget, so they can take more risks and put things out there. And if it's mediocre, a lot of times those movies are still profitable because they cost so little to make. Now they do some like this, like the Exorcist Believers reported to cost about 30 million, which is like pretty budget considering. Considering everything. And so far it's saying worldwide it's made over 45 million. So it's like, it'll probably end up being profitable. But yeah, like Totally Killer is also, I believe, is also a Blumhouse film. So which we
That's the
talked
thing.
about
Yeah,
earlier in
quality
this
is up and
episode.
down, and a bunch of other stuff they've done. Like I said, they pump a lot out, and they're not on this all on the same tier. And it would be nice to see them kind of level everything out and keep offering some really good, especially if you're doing legacy stuff. And I don't see this
Yeah.
getting like a follow up at all. Like, there's no way they're gonna do another Exorcist. I don't think people would be like, why you try to make one that's connected to the original? Just kind of just make an Exorcist movie in general.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. This one, it should not have been tied to the original. But I don't know. I do think I understand what you're saying about the Blumhouse brand, but I still view the Blumhouse banner as an overall positive. Like they've done this, they have enough goodwill with me. Like the 2020 Invisible Man movie, I thought was great, and they did Freaky that same year, the Halloween trilogy, and then doing this. Just talking about recent years, but the Black Phone last year, I thought was great. So I still think that
they're solid, but we'll see what like Five Nights at Freddy's, if that's going to be another like C plus B minus movie. Like, I want to see them have like a B plus A film knockout out of the park is what I want from Blumhouse.
Well, then in that case, I don't think that you should put all your eggs in the Five Nights at Freddy's basket. I think it looks fun enough, but I mean, I don't think that's going to be a masterpiece by any means.
It could be. Let's see what happens with that. I just want to see a masterpiece from Blumhouse. Could have done it with the Halloween films because it started so strong. And if they kept that going with the next two films and really capped it off right, I thought they would have had like one of the best trilogies, to be made. They could have done that, but
I'm looking right now through Wikipedia and the list of Blumhouse productions for each year, and yeah, they release so much,
a lot.
But like,
and you don't know
this
the
year-
Blumhouse films usually too. You got to kind of look deep to see which one are Blumhouse films because they have partial, producer credits on a lot of stuff as well.
Some of these I haven't even heard of, or I don't know where they ended up. You've got Megan came out this year, and that was in theaters. You had Sick come out this year, which was on Peacock, but I actually saw that one at Fantastic Fest last year. A movie called There's Something Wrong with the Children, and another one called Unseen that are on MGM Plus. Of course, you had Insidious, The Red Door was Blumhouse. The Passenger, again, another one I haven't heard of. It's on MGM Plus. Totally Killer, and then The Exorcist Believer. So that's their upcoming. You've got Five Nights at Freddy's for this year. Next year, you've got Night Swim, which I saw the trailer for that one before Exorcist.
I don't like what I saw. It just scared. I already have a problem with like deep waters.
It was a scary trailer.
Yeah.
Night swimming. Yeah. Very creepy. Very creepy.
But yeah, I'm looking at, they have so many movies. I'm actually on the Blumhouse website and they have all their films there, and it's a lot of stuff. A lot of good, a lot of okay, and a lot of like But they're providing a lot of stuff for the horror fan, so that's really great. But Drew, I did enjoy the film. I just didn't think it was scary and didn't really tie into the original very well. But I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I gave it a pretty solid score, especially really kicking off October as well. I thought it's a good watch. It's just not a rated R Exorcist movie to me. It just felt like a PG-13 flick that is pretty creepy to watch.
I'm giving it a 3 out of 5, which is the same thing I rated Totally Killer, ironically. But I think that I went into it with such low expectations that I actually found a lot to like about it. So I wanted to make sure that was represented in my star rating. That being said, there's for sure a lot that you can pick apart here, as far as the actual scary level of the movie and some of the plotting. But I think overall it's like competently made and I enjoyed it enough. So that's why I'll stick with my 3 out of 5.
Well, there you go. There's 2 films you can watch right now that just came out that will kick off October for you. And also there's also Saw 10 that we talked about in the previous episode of the Moviegoers Society podcast. So there's a lot more coming out. I'm going to be watching as much as I can in October. I don't see it another time of the year where I can enjoy some of these scary movies or fun movies like that to really get into the spirit. I don't know. We're talking about number 14. What would be next for us, Drew? What are you thinking?
Well, I'm currently midway through Netflix's The Fall of the House of Usher series that'll be coming out on Friday, October 12th. So I'll have a review written for that by the time it releases. So that might be worth talking about. I'll say right here, I'm actually liking the series a good amount. So it'll be a good Halloween season watch from Mike Flanagan and people that like his content.
Yeah.
So I can talk about that. I know it's not a movie, but I'll talk about that next week.
No, I caught a couple episodes of that already. And then when can we talk about Monarch?
I think we can talk about those first 5 episodes next weekend as well, timed with New York Comic Con. So
hopefully we can do that soon. Yeah, that'd be great to do that too. That's the Godzilla World series on Apple TV Plus. So we can talk about that. And then film wise, we just got to see. There's a lot coming out film wise. We just got to see what we got on the docket. But if you
jury's still out on whether or not I'm actually going to see Taylor Swift the Eras tour. Like,
no,
I'm considering it.
Watch it so we can add it to our episode, and we'll make that the premiere or the headline film for next week.
Oh my gosh! But what if I have bad things to say about it, Sean?
You don't want the Swifties after you.
It's not a group I want on their. Although maybe I will be enlightened by the film. Maybe it'll be everything.
Come up positivity so you have the Swifties off your back. So we'll just do that. And if you haven't yet, check out our previous episodes of the Moviegoers Society podcast, and then also check out my podcast, Nerdtropolis Mayor Presents, where I interview directors and actors, all on the Nerdtropolis podcast network. And once again, Drew, where can they find you?
You can find me at Drew Munhausen on all the different social media platforms and over at Fresh Out the Podcast.
Thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Moviegoers Society. Once again, I am Sean Tajipour, the mayor of Nerdtropolis, and we will see you at the movies.